But first, the first US presidential debate, it's come early, could signal the beginning of the end for Joe Biden after a woeful performance riddled with incoherent ramblings and bizarre facial expressions. It's left the Democrats with a huge dilemma. Do they stick with a president who has defeated Trump before but is clearly in cognitive decline, or do they parachute in a new contender? And just who is that? Joining me now is former Senior Defence Intelligence Analyst, contributor for The Australian, Paul Monk. Paul, you will have watched it as I did. I mean, you just couldn't take your eyes away from what we saw at 11 o'clock on Friday. What did you make of Biden's performance?
Well, I think my reaction would have been similar to that of most people, regardless of their politics, and that is that these were all the signs of a man who is mentally and physically frail. And we should bear in mind that the previous day in his State of the Union address, he appeared anything but. He spoke clearly and vigorously. But the key thing is that people have to say, well, but when it comes to a major decision, another speech, a foreign engagement, which Biden will we see? And you shouldn't have to ask that question. So that's what's landed on the American voting public since Friday, and it's clear that it's cost Biden a great deal in terms of credibility and popularity as a candidate.
The Labor MP, he's a doctor, Mike Freelander, this is Australian Labor MP, he has said he thinks Biden's got Parkinson's disease. Clearly we have talked about him having some sort of medical condition here for many months in Australia. I've said for about a year that I cannot imagine he will be there on the ballot in November. It's like they've just woken up to it in America, or at least they're publicly talking about it. I think it's been a conversation with Democrats, but now you have the cheer squad left media. The New York Times, as an example, said he's got to go. I watched a lot of CNN over the weekend. They were damning in terms of his performance. Now that he has lost the mainstream media, do you think this is really the beginning of the end?
Well, I think the dilemma for the Democratic Party and the people who manage it, they're the ones we should be looking at closely, is they should have made this move a long time ago. And now we're getting closer and closer to the election. Trump is clearly leading. If the election was to be held tomorrow, there seems no doubt he would win in a landslide. And so the Democrats have to decide, if we change candidate, if we switch horses in midstream, is that going to help or harm our cause? And all the signs are that his kitchen cabinet and the people around him, and Obama and Clinton, Bill Clinton, are all rallying around and say, oh, no, he's fine, he's fine. That's not a good look. I think that the voting public would be far more impressed if people took a deep breath and said, we have to confront the truth, and persuaded Biden that he needs to come clean with the voting public and urge them to vote for another candidate. But at the moment, that's not what's happening.
So in mechanical terms, they can put up a new candidate. We all know it isn't easy. Normally, the vice president would be the front runner, but there's not a lot of support at all for Kamala Harris. Lukewarm at best. I can absolutely understand why. This is the party of peak diversity, though. So how do they pass over a woman of colour? She's not black. She doesn't have Afro-American heritage. A lot of people get that wrong. But how do they pass over a woman of colour? And if it's not Harris, who is it?
Well, I think that the key question here again is a matter of what I would call the moral courage of the leadership of the Democratic Party. They need to be willing to say Kamala Harris was chosen on the basis of identity politics, and we didn't expect that she'd become president. And we need somebody now who will be presidential from the get-go. And so we need an open convention, and this is a really rare thing. But if the top brass can step up to the plate and be honest with the American public, I think that alone would impress a lot of voters. Because too many people, too many voters, I think are leaning towards Trump because they distrust the Democratic establishment. And that establishment is facing, well, you could say a debacle of its own making. They haven't shown enough forward vision. They haven't brought forward the people who would constitute a really gripping or compelling leadership ticket. So at the moment, they're at a bit of a loss. There's been some talk for... Go on.
No, you please go on.
Yeah. I was just going to say, there's been talk, for example, of wanting to get Hillary Clinton to make another stand. It'd be interesting to see how that went. Or of getting not so much another rerun, but getting Madam Obama to step up. And she's indicated, as I understand it, she has no interest in running. One wonders whether, if the Democratic leadership was to say, well, listen, for the sake of the party, we have to have somebody, and it really has to be a woman, and preferably a woman of colour, and you're the perfect candidate. Please, please, please. But again, that's not, it seems to me at the moment, what's happening. There's been talk of Gavin Newsom stepping up, but he doesn't have much time, and he's a relatively colourless political figure. So they've got a real dilemma on their hands.